Please be seated. Just a moment ago, we heard the words from the letter to the Ephesians that form a prayer for the Ephesian church. The writer is asking God for some specific things. And as I read these words of this prayer, I think about how appropriate it is as a prayer for you and for me, for our church, for our faith community, for all of God's people. So I want to remind you of this prayer and ask that you take this prayer and this week, pray it. Pray for others with this prayer. Because the writer asks that God would strengthen you in your inner selves from the riches of His glory through the Spirit. For God to strengthen you in your inner self, strengthen your experience of God, strengthen you for whatever life sends your way. The writer asks that Christ will live in your hearts through faith, the presence of Christ, through trusting and knowing that the risen Christ is with us. As a result of having strong roots in love, I ask that you'll have the power to grasp love's width and length, height and depth together with all believers. He's praying that you will know the vastness of love, the height of it, the depth of it, the breadth of it, the length of it, the love of God, the power of love when we have love for one another. I ask that you'll know the love of Christ that is beyond knowledge, so that you will be filled entirely with the fullness of God. It's a wonderful prayer that you would be filled because of the love of Christ with the fullness of God. But the writer goes on, and it's that second part, that last part that I want to focus on this morning with the doxology. That is, with a word of praise, a praising God, a kind of benediction as well, a good word that the writer speaks to the Ephesians. He says, "Glory to God who is able to do far beyond all that we could ask or imagine by His power at work within us." God who is able to do far beyond what we can ask or imagine by God's power at work within us. Now, our translation, the Common English Bible that I just read from, that we heard a moment ago, simply says far beyond. It doesn't really capture it because the writer of the Ephesians is struggling to communicate something that really is beyond words. The amazing abundance of what God is able to do, what God is able to accomplish as God is at work within us. And so the writer, who's writing in Greek, of course, has to make up words to communicate this. Actually invents language to try to get at this, a kind of sort of superlative, double superlative adverb to try to get to it. Above all things, above and over and above is one way you could translate it, but it's a little bit awkward. So this is one of those passages that translators struggle with, not because the words are hard to understand, but that what the writer is stringing together is so unusual and it goes beyond words to express. And so they try it. So I want to read you some of the translations of this passage. There are a lot of different translations. Vastly more than more, beyond all things, super abundantly beyond and above all things, far over everything, surpassingly more than all, transcendently more, far in excess, far, far more than anything, immeasurably more than all, everything immeasurably far beyond. The Jerusalem Bible just sort of gives up trying to string all those words together and just says infinitely more. Another translator, though, tries to take it all on and says, infinitely more abundantly above all. Exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think. All that we would ever dare to ask or even dream of. Between the services, someone said, the best translation might be from Buzz Lightyear to infinity and beyond. Trying to grasp this notion of the abundance of God's grace, the abundance of God at work in our lives, beyond anything that we can ask or imagine. Our translation for today uses that phrase, far beyond, which is, of course, a lot simpler and captures it pretty well. But it seems to me that the writer of the letter to the Ephesians is challenging us to live a life that's more than just the usual, but a far beyond life. So that we live far beyond our usual love for others, far beyond our usual hospitality, far beyond our usual generosity, far beyond our usual acts of kindness and caring, far beyond our usual time spent in prayer, far beyond our usual commitment to justice. This far beyond life is what he calls us to. And what really limits that, as Mr. Mark said so beautifully in the children's moment, is really our imagination. It's our ability to imagine all that God can do. It's our ability to imagine that can be too small. We can be too small in our imagination, too small in our thinking, too small in our dreaming, too small in our working, too small in our giving. We can make God too small in the process. The good news of our faith is God is able to do abundantly far beyond anything that we can even ask or imagine as God is at work within us. Turn over to the Hebrew Scriptures, to Joshua, and the story of the people entering into the Promised Land. They come to the Jordan River, and it's flood season, and it's raging, and it's this big barrier that they can't cross. And it's a wonderful story because what happens is the priests who are leading this procession do an amazing thing. They actually step into the water. And when they step into the water, it says that way up the Jordan River in a place called Adam, which is far away, it says. Archaeologists think, well, maybe about 20 miles if they have the location they assume is the location. 20 miles up the river where no one could see what's going on up there. God piles up the waters, it says, so that the effect downstream is that they can cross over into the Promised Land. And I love what one of the commentators says about that passage. He says, God is always at work upstream in our lives. Upstream where we can't see what's going on. We can see the effect. We can see the results. But God is always at work upstream. And we could say beyond, far beyond anything that we can ask or imagine. God is at work in us. So our task is to open ourselves to God in that way. It is to trust. It is to live this far beyond kind of life. Today, of course, we are concluding our phase of our stewardship campaign that is in worship, with sharing and reminding us all of how stewardship is a part of our discipleship. Our giving is a part of our discipleship. And as we have approached this time, we've looked back. We looked back and celebrated the 90th anniversary of the groundbreaking of the church. We looked back and we celebrated all those milestones where those who went before us imagined big, not small. They dreamed big. They worked large. They trusted in a big way. They gave generously. And they discovered over and over again how God is able to do abundantly far beyond anything that we can ask or imagine as God is at work within us. What they did time and time again was they stepped into the river over and over again. So we looked back and we celebrated them, but we can go back a little farther today and we can think about John Wesley and his teaching about the use of money. John Wesley imagined big, he dreamed big, he imagined completely changing a nation, a country, England, Scotland and Wales, Ireland. He imagined this transformation as people got together and they held one another accountable and they embraced the grace of God that's more abundant than we can even possibly imagine. And he challenged them at the point of the use of money. It's one of his standard sermons, sermon number 50. And in that sermon, he began by saying, in essence, it's ridiculous to imagine that money is evil. It's not. It's not the root of evil. Rather, the love of money or the worship of money, that's the root of evil, but not money. He said money is like anything else. It can be used for evil or it can be used for great good. And then he taught 3 simple rules. Earn all you can, gain all you can, he said. But make sure that as you're gaining all you can, you don't do it at the expense of your health or your emotional life or your spiritual life, and you don't harm yourself in any way and you don't harm someone else in gaining all you can. With those qualifications, gain all you can, he taught. The second principle was save all you can. And by that he meant understand what enough means. And then don't waste, but save all you can. And then the third was give all you can. Years later, when he was 86 years old, he preached a sermon in Dublin in which he looked back on the life of the Methodist movement, and he said, Methodists, nearly all of them learned the first one. Gain all you can. He said some of the Methodists learned the second one, save all you can. He said only a few Methodists learned the third one. And Wesley challenged them in that sermon to recapture that spirit. See, he was not just preaching, but he was living that. When Wesley first started out, you know, his annual income was 30 pounds, which was a pretty good salary in those days. His living expenses were 28 pounds, and so he gave 2 pounds away. The next year, his income had doubled, and he lived on 28 pounds and gave the rest away. The next year, 50% increase over the previous year. He lived on 28 pounds, he gave the rest away. The next year, another 50% or so increase, and he lived on 30 pounds that year, he gave the rest away. Do you know, one year he made 1,400 pounds from his writing and publishing and all that. He lived on 30 pounds and gave the rest away. Remarkable. So he knew what it was to earn all you can, to save all you can, to give all you can, and challenged those Methodists and challenges us to do the same. But behind all that was this ability to imagine what God was doing and to know that even in imagining big, that God was able far beyond, to do far beyond what we can think or imagine or ask, because God is at work within us. Wesley had this to say about money. It's just a reminder of the power of it and what it means when we give generously. It's in that same sermon on the use of money that Wesley said, "Money is an excellent gift of God, answering the noblest ends. In the hands of his children, it's food for the hungry, drink for the thirsty, clothing for the naked. It gives to the traveler and the stranger where to lay his head. By it we may supply the place of a husband to the widow and of a father to the fatherless. We may be a defense for the oppressed, a means of health to the sick, of ease to them that are in pain. It may be as eyes to the blind, as feet to the lame, yea, a lifter up from the gates of death." The power of money for good and the power of generosity as God is at work in us and in our community to do far more, far beyond, abundantly far beyond, to infinity and beyond what we are able to ask or imagine. I want to close with some words written by William Arthur Ward. Some of you may remember him. He died in 1994. But he was an inspirational writer. He wrote articles, or had a column in the Star Telegram called Pertinent Proverbs. He was, beginning in the 1950s, assistant to the president at Texas Wesleyan College, now Texas Wesleyan University. He served as the lay leader of the Polytechnic Methodist Church, one of our sister churches that sits on the edge of the Texas Wesleyan campus. He taught Sunday school there for several years. But he wrote this piece that I want to close with, that I think challenges us to that far beyond life. "I will do more than belong. I will participate. I will do more than believe. I will practice. I will do more than care. I will help. I will do more than be fair. I will be kind. I will do more than forgive. I will forget. I will do more than dream. I will work. I will do more than teach. I will inspire. I will do more than earn. I will enrich. I will do more than give. I will serve. I will do more than live. I will grow. I will do more than be friendly. I will be a friend." Amen.